Ms. Reddy, thank you very much for joining us. This is one of your key flagship hospitals.
Yes.
It has 700 beds. It's in the NCR region. I wanted to, however, start this conversation by talking about your digital arm, because recently there's a lot of optimism from the brokerage community around what is happening with Apollo 24/7, which is housed in Apollo Health Company. Can you give us a sense in terms of where things stand? Because the GMV is expected to probably rise to around 1,500 crores. That's what's targeted. And there is hope that the user base, the medicine volumes can go up by 5x.
Yes, so let me start by saying that at Apollo, everything we do is based on clinical knowledge and moving closer to the consumer. So this was, this is how 24/7 was thought of. Even though it was launched during COVID, we recognized the importance of having patients access the hospital. We also realized that the world is changing, and internet penetration in India of smartphones itself is 54%. So we said, let's use this information and our experience that we have as a hospital, as a clinical provider, and then move it into something which, a digital phase, which is 24/7. So if you think of 24/7, we started with 3 offerings, which is pharmacy online, teleconsults, where we do about 2,500 teleconsults, and now 3,000 diagnostics. So we have currently 3 offerings, and we will offer condition management.
How much of the revenue is actually from diagnostics within the vertical? How much of it is from pharmacy? The reason I ask is that one of the criticisms about a lot of these omni-channel plays is that you get majority of your volumes from diagnostics. Is that the case?
No, actually here, we have a very strong pharmacy arm. So we have the largest offline pharmacies, which are 5,000. So this is currently a very strong pharmacy play. About next year, 75 to 80% of our revenues will be pharmacy online, and the balance will be between teleconsults as well as diagnostics. But more importantly, we're adding on condition management. And when you do condition management, you're actually looking after the well-being of your consumers.
Do you think that that has enough potential even after COVID? Because teleconsulting, condition management had really come up during COVID on a digital scale. But is that expected to continue or even scale up?
No, certainly it will continue because, as you think of digital penetration and ease of use, it will scale up. So while it peaked at 5,000 teleconsults during COVID, we still have 50% of them continuing. And I think it's all about patient engagement, where we want to be, in the entire life cycle of the consumer's healthcare journey. And so therefore, I do believe it will continue.
Most of it is probably follow-on consulting and maybe even new streams such as mental health?
Certainly, it is follow-up because, the first consult, it's always good to have a physical consult. And then you interact and engage with the patient or the consumer in their healthcare journey. But beyond that, I think it's emergencies where they will need a specialist or they will need a doctor. And the fact that we're able to provide one in 20 minutes, I think makes a huge difference.
So one of the things which has been spoken about in terms of e-pharmacies is the kind of steep competition that we're seeing. For example, MedPlus had told us that, the first 3 orders by an online e-pharmacy, the discount is so high that it's difficult to sometimes compete with that. What is the kind of discounts provided by Apollo and as compared to what the industry in the e-pharmacy space is providing?
So I think, we should not be compared to anyone in particular because we are different and we are an omni-channel play. So we have 5,000 stores and we also now with digital, we have 20 million downloads. So it's a combination of both, And I think this gives us a lot of flexibility. And so in terms of discounting, I think we've reduced discounting. We're probably at 18.5.
This is for online or offline?
For online. And of course, for us, our focus is re-engagement with the consumer. We don't want it to be a one-time transaction. And this is where we have a huge strength. Because every customer who comes to our physical store is a repeat, he's a repeat customer online. Every person who engages with the hospital has a higher chance, will use the online pharmacy mode. So, like in the telecom sector, there was deep discounting. And, and slowly it's been phasing out, because eventually, if you're in a business, you have to be able to show sustainability through profits. And that will happen in 24/7.
And brick and mortar, if 18% is online, what is offline discounting?
It depends, because circle customers who are frequent users, and they get a deeper discount rather than the retail walk-ins.
That's on the entire e-pharmacy bit. Now, as a whole, Apollo 24/7 is possibly expected to become EBITDA neutral by next year. Is that on the cards?
Yes, Apollo Health Co. will become EBITDA neutral next year.
So it'll be EBITDA neutral. What about, are you expecting your user base to grow 5x, your medicine orders to grow 5x? That's what's envisaged and estimated at this point.
Yes, so we looked at GMV and it's grown tremendously. We currently will close the year with 1,500 crores of GMV, and it will double next year. And which is why, we're quite sure that we will be EBITDA breaking.
Okay, so you're expecting it to probably go to 3,000 crores by FY24?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, what about fundraising? Because y'all have said that y'all are probably looking at fundraising maybe by the end of FY23.
Yes.
Where do things stand? Because in the past, y'all were on track in terms of fundraising, but that got derailed a little bit, or it got delayed. Where is it?
So delayed for a great reason. In terms of performance, we're ahead of what we had planned. And I think it's just getting better, because revenues, GMV is picking up, revenues are getting, we're seeing a huge increase in revenues. In fact, like I said, a doubling next year. So if you look at the absolute cash burn, it's about 150 crores. And we think we'll have only one more year of, where they'll need cash. So while we are looking at investment, I think we'll look for investment that values us. And we at Apollo Hospitals do not want to be significantly diluted, because this is the new age company that I'm sure has great growth.
So 200 million is probably what you're looking at in terms of a fundraise on the maximum or the upper side for Apollo?
Yes, you're right. Maximum 200, but not really required 200.
And how much would you be willing to dilute?
Maximum, I would say 20%. But since we're not looking at 200 million, it could be less.
Okay. Would it be a strategic or a financial investor?
We have options, let me just say that. We'll decide closer to our board meeting.
Would it be a combination of both, more than one investor?
No.
And would it probably close by FY23?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, so maybe by the end of, in the next 3 to 4 months is when we could probably expect that to take place. But now coming down to the hospital business, hospital services has really picked up post-COVID. Your occupancies were around 58%. Are you expecting that to probably improve? Because the industry currently, a couple of your peers are at 70-75%. What is the trajectory on occupancies? So
last quarter it was at 68%, and we did have a lot of fevers also. But the important thing about Apollo is really, one, a denominator has changed. So we have a 9% increase in operational beds. So therefore, you have to keep that in mind when you look at occupancy. I think the second most important thing is that our ALOS has moved from 3.78 to 3.4. And therefore, our asset utilization and absolute number of patients have grown by 19%. So that, these figures on occupancy will keep changing. But these are the triggers, levers that we use.
But any kind of guidance that you have in terms of what your target occupancy would be, where do you want it to sustain? I think it's around 70%.
Yes, you're right. It's around 70%. And I think with this level of ALOS and the current case mix we have, this is, it will generate a lot of free cash flow.
But this case mix, one of the views is that complex surgeries have increased quite significantly because the awareness is greater. So in terms of your case mix, is it much more complex as compared to pre-COVID?
So at Apollo, we've always focused on our COEs, Centers of Excellence, which are cardiac, orthopedic, neurology, transplants, robotic surgery, and a lot of general surgical work and mother and child. So as we look at these specialties, there has been a tremendous increase. So if you take oncology, for example, when we started our investment cycle, we were at 800 crores of revenue. Then we invested in the proton, which really no one in Southeast Asia had done. And hopefully we should close the year with 1,700 crores of revenue coming from oncology. But the premise of all this, the base of all this is that our clinical outcomes should be the best in the world. And therefore we attract the talent. And therefore we can invest in the technology.
The Proton Therapy Center, how much is it generating in terms of revenue? What is the occupancy like? Do you need to set up another center? Can we expect that?
So in terms of revenue right now, it's about 260 crores of revenue. But we're only at 50% capacity utilization. And I think, during COVID, we didn't get that many patients, but it has picked up tremendously.
The other big talking point post-COVID is definitely medical tourism, medical value tourism. There's so much of an impetus from the government as well on it. And companies or hospitals are looking at capex, which is catered to inflow of patients from abroad. Where does it stand as a percentage of sales? How bullish are you on it as a prospect?
People have always measured it as a percentage of sales. So we should close the year with 7%. But having said that, the absolute revenue coming from international patients has actually grown over 19% over 2020 when it was peaked. So in absolute terms, there has been an increase. And I think the potential is to go to 20% of revenue. And we believe that that Apollo will be the biggest player in international patient traffic. And I say this because of our locations. In 2 years, we'll open our Gurgaon facility. We have Delhi, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and Ahmedabad. Being located in all of these centers is bringing us patients from across the world.
Acquisitions, would you look at acquisitions just to fuel that aspect of growth? You have made smaller acquisitions, but something larger, any kind of pipeline you can share with us?
I think any acquisition that is value accretive makes sense to us. So we did Gurgaon, which is brownfield. We're setting up a hospital of the future in OMR in Chennai. So clearly we are expanding our footprint. We're adding 2,000 beds in the next 4 years. So it is a huge expansion. And acquisitions, if something comes across, something comes our way, of course we'll look at it.
Are you looking at acquisitions in the diagnostic space? Considering what has taken place, you all have big plans in diagnostics.
Yes.
You all are looking at around 500 crores in terms of revenue, probably scaling up to around 1,000 odd crores in 3 years as well. Are you going to do that organically because of the competition?
It's so easy and scalable, the diagnostic business, that you really don't have to make big acquisitions. It's like pharmacy. We only did one acquisition, but we have 5,000 pharmacies, and we are the largest player. So I think in diagnostics, maybe some small acquisitions the team might make. And the reason we do this is because economies of scale. We're setting up a very high-end genetic lab in Hyderabad. So it won't be the regular tests. We'll do the difficult complex testing, especially for oncology cases, which will mean better margins.
But is that the future of diagnostics? Because there's so much competition. If you look at the online aggregators, if you look at hospital labs, standalone labs, 100-rupee tests by an online aggregator, that's how competitive the industry is. What is your sense in terms of whether or not that's going to be lucrative at the end?
I think we've always differentiated ourselves by a clinical offering. Like I said, we will be a player at scale in diagnostics, but we will have all the high-end testing, and that will give us some margins. So currently we're at 13% in the diagnostic business, which is a healthy margin. But I think moving on with us opening out at scale, having created these labs, we have more than 2,000 touch points. So I think 1,000 crores of revenue and a healthy margin is something we would expect to see.
And diagnostics is currently housed in Apollo Health and Lifestyle.
Yes.
You also have Apollo Health Co. What happens on a larger scale in terms of restructuring? Are you probably going to look to hive off a couple of these verticals?
So Apollo Health Co will definitely get a capital infusion, but it will always be a significant part of Apollo. We look at the rest of the story as it develops, but I must say that Apollo is more than a holding company, because the diagnostic business is something that has huge growth opportunities, and we will make sure that there will be enough funding available for them to grow that. But right now you must think of Apollo as three verticals. One which is primary care, which includes diagnostics, clinics, and 2,000 touch points. The hospitals, of course, where we have about 45 hospitals that generate, and about 9,000 operating beds, moving up to 10,000. So the hospital vertical is currently 55% of our revenues and generates very healthy margins. So we will continue growth there. Then there's the pharmacy business, which is at 40% of revenue. And that again, we've just spoken about Apollo Health Co, the fact that it's the only omni-channel play in the market today.
Okay, what does all of this do to your margins? Because healthcare services has been growing. Yes, there has been some, brickback in terms of your new centers. But your overall margins are probably being pulled down by Apollo Health Co at this point, simply because of the kind of gestation period that it's in. What can you guide us in terms of the consolidated blended margins for the company?
So yes, I think if you look at the entire revenue and look at the margin profile, it's still a very healthy margin profile, about 14 to 15%, with the hospitals coming in with very strong margins. And we closed last quarter with 24.6, and we will see another 150 basis points improvements coming from the hospital. But I want to say that, what we've done is to create a network of primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, with pharmacy, and soon, with the online consultations. So you must think of us more in terms of how many consumers we reach out to, how many patients we look after. And while that's all about market share, Apollo will have the largest market share in the healthcare space. And margins will come from market share.
Okay, eventually, but as of now, you're envisaging putting around 550 to 600 crores in Apollo Health Co. This year itself, I think you did around 170 crores in terms of operating costs in the previous quarter. So does that scale up next year, or does that sustain?
That is, there could be another 100 crores that they might need. But if the capital infusion comes, they won't really need it. And most of this capital will be deployed for condition management, to onboard condition management, because they do have the pharmacy business is generating over 500 crores of cash, which they will use.
Okay. Eventually, there'll be a simplification in terms of the kind of model that you have. You want to be a 360-degree player in the healthcare space, offering services across verticals. Eventually, there will be some simplification in terms of the structure.
I think right now we must think of these three as the pillars. And I think all of it comes from both a patient perspective and a stakeholder perspective. So, I think we'll align ourselves with what is first good for the patient, and second, what is good for our stakeholders.
There's been some concern with regards to CCI probes on a couple of hospital companies. Where do things stand? Have you all replied to the government? Have you all reached out?
Yes, we have, and that was only for Indraprastha. I think there was a lot of miscommunication that it went across the Apollo system. I think it was a very Delhi-focused CCI, and I'm quite confident that we've done the right thing.
Ms. Reddy, if we have to end this conversation with a larger scale or a larger picture of Apollo, say we have to have this conversation 2 years down the line or 3 years down the line, where do you see Apollo? What is your vision?
So I think you will see Apollo as a network which has hospitals and, like I said, primary care touch points, as well as a pharmacy. So my vision is that, that for the consumer, we can complete the entire healthcare offering, the 360-degree offering, that we are not transactional, we're proactive, because we also want to look after their health, even in the preventive healthcare space. And I think that the next segment of growth will come from the preventive healthcare space. So watch out for us now.
But preventive healthcare, just a quick word on that. How much is it as a percentage of sales currently, and where are you probably targeting the patient or the consumer when it comes to preventive healthcare?
By next year, it will be at 500 crores of sales, and
currently it is?
It's about 300.
Okay, and that includes healthcare services across the board, or just?
No, it includes the health checkups.
Health checkups.
So I'm only counting the health checkups. I'm not talking about the 100 rupee diagnostic tests.
So there's a huge difference in terms of the healthcare system of India pre and post COVID.
There is.
Leave us with your thoughts.
No, there is a huge difference, and the important thing is that people have become conscious of their health. Second, the penetration of insurance has been tremendous. In our payer mix, it's increased by 20%. So this gives people access into the healthcare system, and they're looking for quality healthcare. And I'm glad that we are there to provide it in every form and every format.
Okay, Ms. Reddy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining in and talking to us.
My pleasure.